Okay, great. Well, let's get going. And good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are on the planet. Just before I start, a few important points about how to best use this webinar tool. We're using GoToTraining today. Firstly, if you have any technical issues, any technical problems, hearing or viewing your slides, Louisa Stinton is here with us. Louisa is here for you. She's your technical support person. You can contact her via your chat pane, which is in your control panel on the right-hand side of your screen. If you can't see your control panel, very important, have a look on the right-hand side of your screen now. Have a look right at the top. Amongst other things, you'll see a little red rectangular box with a white arrow in it. Click on that. That opens your control panel, and down the bottom, you'll see your chat pane. You're going to be using that a lot today because this is a highly interactive session. So any issues, use Louisa. You can chat to her, you can call her, you can email her if you like, whatever's going to work best for you. We're going to run this session with you all muted. We will unmute speakers as they're required. But it is an interactive session, and there are several ways that you can interact. The first way is that we're going to be running some polls, and I'd actually like to kick off with a poll now. This session is the 10th Information Overload day. It's the IORG Information Overload Day, the 10th that has happened. I want to run a poll and just ask you, compared to 3 years ago, how is your information overload doing? Is it better? Is it the same? Or is it worse? If you could all vote now, please. This is an interactive session. The faster you do these interactions, the better. It just keeps the momentum going of the whole event. So if you could vote, please. Is it better? Is it same? Is it worse? So we've got 61% of you have voted. It's all very simple. Just click on the one that's relevant to you, then click submit. So a few more people to vote. If you could vote, please. If you are unmuted, can you make sure you mute yourself? Or Lou, if you can make sure people are muted, that will be brilliant. Okay, I'm going to close the poll, and I'm going to play the results back to you. And the results show, and all the speakers, it would be great for you to just make a note of this. 49% of people worse, 36% the same, only 15% are better. Okay, so then the question we need to ask is, if you answered worse or better, what do you attribute that change to? Just type it into your chat pane now. Remember, your chat pane is in your control panel on the right-hand side of your screen. If you can't see it, have a look for that little red rectangular box with the white arrow. Just type it in now. We're going to be sort of looking at all the responses and working with them as we go through the various presentations. So type in, what do you attribute it being better or worse to? So lots of things coming through. Technology makes it very easy to create overload, job description changing, more responsibilities, more changes, tools used for communication. That's making it worse or better. So before you type in what you're going to type in, just say better or worse. Whatever you did, whatever you voted, just say better or worse. You can keep those coming through. Keep them coming through. Keep typing in. I'd just like to pass over now to Nathan Zeldes. Nathan Zeldes is the chairman. He's the president and chairman of IORG. Just for Nathan to do an introduction. So over to you, Nathan.
There we go. Okay, so welcome everybody. Look at the attendee list there, and I see many familiar names and I see many new names, new to me at any rate, which I hope will remain familiar. Welcome to the Information Overload Day webinar hosted by the Information Overload Research Group. And if you don't know us, IORG is a nonprofit founded in 2008 in order to raise awareness and seek solutions to this huge problem that is destroying the productivity and sanity and quality of life of knowledge workers worldwide, which is us and you. And we try to do it by bringing together academics and consultants and developers and industry practitioners and encourage the exchange of viewpoints and ideas among them. If you want to see the details, go visit our website. As for today's event this year, we decided to focus not on email, even though that still is a major problem. We will instead look at solutions beyond email, which are all these new tools that promise to offload some of the email traffic. And many people I say this to feel there's no use in doing that because, why move the load from one channel to another? But they forget that email is 1960s technology. Email was started in the days before the Commodore 64, right? When we had these clunky modems and text terminals. And today we have so much more compute power and so much different tools and a completely different workplace. So it makes sense to use the new tools, which while they offload from email, also improve the way the information flows and make everything more efficient and productive, especially for teams. And we'll hear about these tools today. And lastly, I want to remind you that this day is not just about listening to other people talk about the problem. It's about all of us doing something about it. So please take something from today and make an effort to apply it in your environment, to your teams, to your subordinates or coworkers, and do something. Because your coworkers will thank you for it, and your boss will thank you for it, and most certainly your children will thank you for it. So now let's take a look at today's agenda and we can get started.
Thanks very much, Nathan. So you've been able to have a good look at the agenda there. And now we've got the first item, which is an introduction from one of our founding members, Jonathan Spira. So Jonathan, you should be able to share your webcam now, and you are unmuted. So over to you.
Good morning, everyone. Let me make sure my camera's on, since we've been so careful about privacy and all that. Oh, let me put my phone down. Gee, I'm just overloaded here. Yeah, sorry. Happy Information Overload Day, everyone. I want to thank everyone first for joining us on this holiday commemorating the problem of information overload, which truly came to me a little over 10 years ago as a way of getting more attention to the important issue that we're tackling. Next slide. So the question we're really dealing with is, as my father would say, zu viel des Guten, which from German means too much of a good thing. I don't have to read the definition that I've created in front of you, but not back slide. Yeah. I don't have to read the definition you have in front, but it creates a kind of paralysis due to simply having too much information. Next slide. Let's look though at next slide. Let's look where we were 10 years ago when I first conceptualized the idea of the holiday, and also the concept which Nathan, Zeldes, and I came together and helped form IORG. We were still trying to understand the transition to a knowledge-based economy. It wasn't a simple transition. We didn't wake up. There's a lot of background noise, Mark. I don't know where that's coming from. We didn't know and wake up saying suddenly, wow, we're in a knowledge-based economy one day. It just happened that it evolved over a period of time as knowledge work became more possible thanks to the introduction of technology tools. That led to the rise of the knowledge worker, something I've covered probably in excess in the past 9 Information Overload Day events. And it came down to the question of taming the wild, wild west of technology. At least we thought that up until that point. Next slide, please. The issue, though, is what we didn't foresee. The results of information overload. What hath information overload wrought? I think that the 5 bullet points I'm presenting to you are fairly devastating and also, sadly, according to my research, rather understated. The worst being perhaps skewed work-life balance and less innovation. But all these come together to create an absolutely devastating problem, which we are dedicated towards the resolution of. Next slide, please. But what I didn't do at the time when doing some of my earlier research was look at the problem through other lenses. And I'm trying to do that now, fresh start in terms of the research, and look at specific problems which we come across through a different lens. Next slide. The first problem I want to also give a little bit of nod to my colleague, David Goldis, who couldn't be with us today due to an illness in the family. But we haven't realized where information overload pops up. I think his statement is really crucial here. Information is all around us. It is perhaps the most democratic of all things coming out of technology because no one is immune. Next slide, please. But it's just really a scourge. I present to you the diner conundrum. You go into a diner in the United States and you're presented with a menu. I don't know, they're 60 or 100 pages. I don't know. It takes 2 people to carry them over. It's a huge thing, and you're presented with all this. And you look, and you sort of start to dig in, and you see how many choices are on a page. And ultimately, you just order a hamburger. It's just too much. You're frozen to the point of incapacitation by that. This is what I call the diner conundrum. And same thing, you're looking at the telly, and you put the channel thing on if you still have one of those old-fashioned cable television services, and I haven't had one in a few years, but I assume it's probably up to 3,000 or 4,000 possibilities now. And you just watch a rerun of something you're comfortable with, as opposed to picking something from the 3,000 choices. Next slide, please. So what I came across in our research is the problem of digital publishing. Yes, we know there's much more information being presented to us than ever before. Next slide, please. But we really didn't know what happens from all that information. And what I found when I began to scratch the surface was there's a dramatic decline in what's called reader consumption time. This is the time that someone spends reading an article or story in a magazine or newspaper. That leads to decreased engagement. Much to the chagrin of the publisher, it leads to lower ad revenues, and much to the chagrin of journalists, it leads to redundancies, mass firings in newsrooms, which have happened recently at major papers. Next slide, please. So, to combat all this, we decided to create a new research institute called the Mies Institute, taking inspiration from Mies van der Rohe, known for his aphorism, less is more, although more accurately, he probably first said it, and in German is weniger ist mehr. Next slide, please. We're scratching the surface with this very focused research on topics that actually have a detrimental societal impact, such as what I was just demonstrating with, we're not going to be able to fix diners, and we're probably not going to fix what's on the television guide, but we can address what's happening in publishing, because there are things we're seeing in even the initial research we've done that will point us along the way. So I want to say a happy Information Overload Day, of course, and I want to thank you very much for coming. 10 years is a long run. I was amazed when we started, when I was chief analyst at Basics, and my colleagues at Basics and I started Information Overload Day, and we had so many people come that the conference room was overrun, probably thanks to the publicity in the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, and CNN right before the online event. And we attempted a 6-hour online event, and most people actually stayed once they got in the room. So sit here 10 years later is actually quite amazing. That is, and I know somebody saying it's too much choice. Well, that's too much information as well, but it's an overload of information. Information comes in the form of choices. I appreciate the comment, Jack. I'll go into more detail on this as our research evolves, but if you're familiar with the phrase TMI, too much information, there's nothing better than to celebrate Information Overload Day today with us. And I'd like to thank you for coming. I'll be back sporadically through the event and also to do the Q&A. And we'll continue now. Mark, the next speaker, please.
Thank you very much, Jonathan. Fantastic. And Jonathan will be back to do the concluding remarks and also a Q&A. Now we're really lucky. We have Mark Wright from Simply Communicate, who has put together a panel, really fantastic panel of Nicole Alvino from Social Chorus, Martin Perks, who's a strategic advisor around enterprise networks, and Lorraine Solomon from Monster. She's Vice President of Internal Communications from Monster. So, Mark, these four are actually sitting in a room in London, in a WeWork in London, I believe. Mark, you can now start your videos. You can unmute yourself and get going. So you should have the ability to start your videos now. Excellent. Mark's going to lead a panel discussion on collaboration beyond email. So we'll just get that set up.
There we go. Lovely. Thank you very much, Mark, and welcome everybody here from London, from our studio in London. So yeah, Mark Wright from Simply Communicate. We're a community of 7,000 plus internal communications professionals around the world whose job it is to look after comms inside organizations. So a lot of the next 45 minutes is going to be about enterprise communication, about how we get overloaded inside organizations during work time. What I wanted on the panel really was to represent the whole industry. So starting off with Nicole Alvino, you're on she's a supplier side, so she actually co-founded Social Chorus, one of the popular platforms that's taking over from email, digital intranet platform. I'm also very pleased to have Lorraine, because Lorraine is a user. She has actually put these into recently Monster Worldwide, but before that she was at Thomson Reuters. And Martin, who's a consultant, so he goes into companies just before or some time before they put in these tools to advise them and then to hold their hands during the implementation process. So vendor, user, and guide all round the table here. But let me start with Nicole. Thank you very much for coming in from SF.
Of course, glad to be here.
Lovely to have you here. Just tell us a little bit about Social Chorus. How does it work? Well, what does it do?
Sure. So we are a workforce communications platform, and we truly believe that communication drives or powers a business. So at the core of that is information, and more specifically, getting the right information to the right person in the right place at the right time to drive some sort of action and then measure the business impact. And so our point of view is, let's meet our people where they are, and let's let them choose to engage, whether it is email or mobile or inside of Salesforce or an intranet platform. It really shouldn't matter. It is about making sure that we're getting that right information, and we talk a lot about driving signal through the noise. So in a perfect world, you're getting something that's hyper-targeted to you, Mark. I'm getting what's hyper-targeted to me, which solves the problems we're here talking about today.
So physically, I have it on my phone, so it'd be like a portal, presumably. Is it the same for every organization that has Social Chorus, or do you personalize it?
Every organization has, think of it as their mission control or one main studio where you can create all of the information, target the content, set campaigns to target and retarget, and measure everything. But as far as the employee experience, the employee can we have native mobile apps, there's a desktop, we have embeddable widgets to put inside any sort of intranet containers. Some of our clients are now putting it into a Salesforce, the Atlassian suite, integrations into Teams and Yammer and Slack. Digital signage is coming up more and more.
But the basic premise is to get away from the one-to-one email, the one-to-many email, and this concept of working out loud. Can you just explain to us what is working out loud, and why might that, for almost half of us here who are suffering more information overload, why would that help?
Yeah, I think it's more about what's relevant just to me.
Yeah.
And what business impact is it driving? Is it culture? Do I want to feel more connected to my company?
Yep.
Do I need, as a people manager, to take training? Are we working to drive retention? So we start with what is the business outcome first,
Yep.
and back into what communication is needed to drive that outcome, and who specifically needs that type of communication. Now, of course, the platform layers in lots of fun automation and intelligence, so this isn't of people trying to do this all manually.
Yeah.
That's the beauty and the power of software in the cloud and all of the great innovations with technology. But at the core of it, it really is getting that right piece of information to the right person.
So it's almost like a personal gatekeeper in a way. I'm not going to hear information about, well, we're resurfacing the car park in a branch of my organization which might be 400 miles away. I don't really care about.
That's exactly right.
Yeah. So personalization is key to these things.
Exactly. So yeah, I mean, when we think of personalization,
what sort of companies are using your product?
All types of companies. So here in the UK, Vodafone, Diageo, Convatec, Delphi Automotive. Tomorrow I'm going to Belgium to say AB InBev. In the States, AT&T, Hilton, Boeing,
so these
Ford.
are very large organizations.
Very large organizations.
Tens, if not hundreds of thousands of people.
Yeah, we think that the problem becomes acute, and Lorraine, I would love your thoughts on this. Once you get into the thousands, maybe 5,000, we kind of target 3,000 employees and above, but we do have several companies with a couple thousand of people who have a global workforce that are finding great use of the platform.
I actually think that once you get up about 200 people in an organization, it starts to get a bit noisy, let alone 2,000 or 20,000. As it would. So to what extent is reducing email part of the reason why you were brought in?
Yeah, so some people say, I want to get rid of email. What they're really saying is, how do we get the right information to the right person to drive the action? So email is interesting because it's both a delivery mechanism and a channel. Mm-hmm. So if you think about it as, let's think of our whole communication system as omni-channel. Yeah. And again, meet them where they are. So if email is an effective delivery system for Lorraine, we should continue to deliver what she needs to know and what she wants to know via email. Yeah. So in that case, maybe she doesn't reduce the email, or she reduces email that is superfluous to her. So she won't get the email of things that's happening in the States if she doesn't want to. But if you like everything on mobile, you'll get what you need on mobile.
Okay, well, you make it sound simple, but of course it isn't.
No, that's the complexity. That's the fun of all of our engineers.
Yeah, because if you think about external social media, I'll use LinkedIn for something, I'll use Facebook for something else, Instagram for something else, and so. And internally within organizations, companies are using ERP systems. They're using SuccessFactors. They're using Salesforce. They're using Fuse. There's hundreds of these things. So how on earth can you? We're talking about taming the Wild West. How can you integrate these into one platform? Is it possible at all?
Well, so integration is perfect. I think that we don't believe in a Frankenstein application or platform. I think WeChat is probably the only one successfully to do that. You can do your banking and date in the same application. There's exactly one in the world. When you really think about all of those systems, they're purpose built for a specific function. So if you're a salesperson and you're doing your work inside of Salesforce, that's where you're doing your work. Our point of view is give that salesperson specific news to them delivered right inside of Salesforce. Yeah. And if you're an executive who just wants the latest sales wins by region, by week, let's give a wrap-up report that we would pull the pertinent information from Salesforce. And if that executive prefers it on his or her mobile or an email, let's deliver it there. Yeah.
And that can change during the day as well. I might want to use a phone when I'm on the bus coming into work, but I might be a laptop or in the evening possibly using a tablet. Yeah.
And that's exactly what we do. We look at time of day usage and platform, and then the more we know about you, our machine learning and AI can kick in and deliver you exactly what you need when you want it on your preferred device. And if that information is you need to take this training from Success Factors.
Yeah.
Whether we help render that for you or you want to check your holiday schedule with integrations, we can pull that right for you.
Great. Now, how important are notifications in terms of warning people they should get too many? Is it useful to them?
It depends on who you ask. I personally don't clear my notifications, so I have over 200,000 unread emails, which makes some people have heart palpitations. I just ignore it. So I think that there's, again, it's about a call to action. I personally like getting push notifications, and for me, that's a trigger to do something. And I've been, I can choose the notifications that I want, but it's really about what action do you want the communication to drive, especially in the workplace, and determining, again, the right trigger for the right individual.
Yeah, well, I know that internal communications professionals amongst our audience here love them because it does actually have an effect. If you push it, people do answer. Mm-hmm. So talking about internal communication, let me move now and turn now to Lorraine. So Lorraine, you've put in 2 of these platforms. One was Jive and one was Beezy, the more recent one, I understand. When you joined Monster, why did you feel that you needed to create one of these new platforms, not just stick with email?
So I guess there are 3 reasons. So I guess, first of all, it was my previous experience. So as you said, I put one in at Thomson Reuters. I didn't understand at the time how powerful it was going to be. And it absolutely in the way we communicated across the organisation and the behaviours that we saw in people. So when I joined Monster, I joined with a previous boss of mine who'd also worked at Thomson Reuters. And my first day I said, so what's my brief? And he said, go and engage with the organisation because we need people to be happy and productive, really make the business work. But whatever you do, introduce another social platform like the one you did at Thomson Reuters. So I had a very clear brief, but it was a brief based on, some a previous company. I guess the second reason was that we are, and we continue to be a business in transformation. And during that period, we really need people to understand where we're going, how we're going to get there, and more importantly, the role that they need to play in our transformation. And then the third reason comes back a little bit to the conversation that we've just been having. In my experience, having done internal communications in a number of organisations over the years, the most common question I'm asked ever when I'm in an organisation is, can't you just send out an email? And people expect like this kind of magic to work with an email. They expect people to open it, and I'm guilty. I don't always open emails that I receive. I haven't got 200,000 open applications, but I don't always open them, particularly if it's from a corporate, if it's from someone I know, maybe. If it's from corporate communications, guilty as charged, I probably won't open it. And then even if I open it, I might not read it, and I might not understand it, and I might not do anything about it. In fact, I might vehemently disagree. I've often opened emails and said, what a load of nonsense, and then deleted them. And yet there is an expectation that people are going to open it, read it, like it, do something about it. So they want to achieve a specific business outcome. Actually, the email is unlikely to achieve that business outcome. And then kind of relating to that, quite often when I go into an organisation, I say to people, how do you want to receive information? And the default is always, well, send me an email. It's like when someone cold calls you and you want to get them off the phone, you say, well, send me an email. You know you're never going to read it.
Go to that black hole somewhere, never to be responded to.
And actually, we want people to do something or change within an organisation. So just kind of, by giving them an email by default, isn't going to work. So for me, a digital workplace, creates an environment where you can involve people in a very different conversation. And so far that's worked. It's been a really exciting journey.
It only works with one put in creating a platform, and there's only 3 or 4 of you on there, and the rest of the organisation is still using email. So how did you? This is get the platform. No matter how good the platform is, how did you manage to get people to use it?
So I guess first of all, you need to kind of understand that it does take time. We're not going to introduce it day one and then all of a sudden everyone's on the platform. think I've learned from introducing too that there's a few tricks. Number one is kind of go where the energy lies. So there's always going to be people that are really resistant, and you can kind of bang your head against a brick wall. And I kind of don't worry about that so much at the beginning. I go with the people that are enthusiastic about it, get a little bit of momentum, get a little bit of excitement going. The second thing we did at Monster, which was really great, was we created a team of what we call change champions, people right across the organisation in our different offices that wanted to be part of the movement, wanted to be part of the change. And they were involved in helping to bring it to life. I'm going to say training, but it wasn't training, because now I think platforms are so intuitive. We just wanted to create a bit of excitement and confidence about platform. The third thing for me was about getting the senior team on board. Unfortunately, at Monster, I'm part of the executive leadership team. So as I was developing the platform, I involved them in various stages of the run. So they were on board, kind of writing it. And I got them to start using it, start blogging, start liking things, start asking questions, start replying to people, and kind of people saw their behaviours and began to emulate them. And then the fourth and the kind of slightly more controversial thing was for kind of key communications. I took away the email. And when I was at Thomson Reuters, that was quite controversial, because for the first 2 weeks, I had all these senior leaders phoning me up saying, why don't I know this information? And then I redirected them to the platform, and then they soon learned that was the place to go for information. So I did the same thing at Monster, and that is a fairly quick way of changing people's behaviour right from the beginning, because they have to go to a different source.
I suppose if you turn up at the meeting and everybody else is approved, because they're in that community on a particular platform, and you've been waiting for the email and it hasn't arrived, you literally couldn't get home. You soon do something about it. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Mark, could I just interrupt? I do apologise, but the sound, there are quite a few people complaining about the sound. If you could get closer to the speaker or just direct your voice to the speaker when you're talking, I think it will probably make a difference. And also, it seems to be picking up any shuffle or anything. I don't know if I think it's coming from the room there, but if we can just be wary of it. Sorry to interrupt. I don't want to break your flow.
We are hearing noise from your microphone.
So okay. Lou, if we can do anything about it, that will be great. If you've called in and you're not, if you're unmuted, please mute yourself. Otherwise, we'll have to dismiss you. Thank you, Sarah and Timothy. Please mute yourself. Thank you.
Via GoTo training. So it's been a year, a bit more than a year, that you've had the platform in place in Monster. What have been the results?
So I'd say everyone is using it to some extent. So it has become the go-to place for information. Every month we monitor results and we see more and more people actively playing part on the digital workplace. Not everyone uses it, as we would like to. There's still a way to go. But like my experience at Thomson Reuters, the change has been absolutely phenomenal.
Okay, and 2 platforms you put into 2 large organisations. What learnings would you give? So someone who's considering going down this route, what are the learnings that you've had over the years?
So I guess work very closely with your technology team. At Monster, I've been really privileged. We are part of one big virtual team, and it's been a real partnership. As I said earlier, go where the energy lies. Just encourage people to get on, give them confidence, make it an enjoyable experience, and don't worry about those people that don't engage first of all, because they will eventually. And I guess the other thing I would say is that it's not the only solution. I think Nicole touched on this as part of a wider internal communication channel strategy. It's a great way of involving people in a conversation. But as always, kind of face-to-face for me is still key. I still like to be able to look in the whites of someone's eyes and have a conversation, or have a telephone conversation or a webinar conversation. But this is definitely part of an overall communication strategy, and it really works. I was very cynical, so when I first started on my journey at Thomson Reuters, I didn't understand the power and the potential that this type of thing really has.
And what about information overload? Do you think information overload has improved, stayed the same, got worse?
Within the organisation, it's definitely improved, because, as I say, we've switched off a lot of the corporate email channel. So people have to go to our digital workplace, and once they're on a digital workplace and they see the power and the potential, quite a lot of their work is done on that platform now. And our platform integrates with things like Salesforce. So we're not there yet, but it's becoming a one-stop shop for the information that people need to do their job, and for us to affect the behaviour change that we really need as part of our transformation journey.
The integrations that Nicole was talking about. Now, obviously, please do ask questions of our experts in the chat function. There's a lovely example of working out loud in front of us here, which is which platform did they go with? Was it Jive? And someone else has already jumped in and said no, it was Beezy. You had Jive, obviously, at Thomson Reuters.
We had Jive at Thomson Reuters. Actually, I didn't put it in. So when I got to Thomson Reuters,
It
Jive was already there, but no one used it. It was used as a bit of an old-fashioned traditional intranet.
Yeah.
People didn't really realise how to use it.
Yeah.
We started on a journey to use it as a proper social intranet, and it kind of really took off.
I mean, Jive was state of the art 5 years ago, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And what was good about it is that it had connectors into Outlook, into. It's really fallen down by the wayside. I was talking to a bank this morning that still has it, and you know, can't wait for the contract to end in the middle of next year so they can move. And I think that's a really important point, is that it's not just about technology. You have to understand the company behind the technology. How committed are they to this stuff? You know, and their philosophy.
And it was interesting because when I started at Monster, my kind of default was, well, we'll use Jive again because I use it once, it's successful, so why wouldn't I use it again? But rather than just jump into something, I was really keen to understand what's the business problem that we're trying to solve. You know, what is it that we're trying to achieve? And once I was really clear, we did a lot of work. Once I was really clear about that, and thank you to you, Mark, we had a look at a number of different platforms.
There's half a dozen of them.
Kind of based on our business problem, you know, and it was clear that Jive, you know, kind of really wasn't the right one for us. So we looked at others and eventually went with Beezy.
I mean, in the defence, they were bought. So I got bought by a company that wasn't really in the sector, and you know, the other ones like Socialcast have fallen by the wayside. But there's plenty of new ones that you've been around for a while, haven't you? Socialcast.
We have. So I was just thinking, AT&T has been our longest client, and almost 10 years ago. So I think to Lorraine's point, it's important to understand the company behind it and the full vision. So AT&T first bought us as external employee advocacy, which is where we got our start. And then as we moved into the full suite of workforce communications, they're now using us to reach their 300,000 global employees. So it's a journey, and I think that there are some companies that put innovation at the top of the vision. And so I would questions about what is the roadmap, what is the vision, what are you really trying to solve in the business,
and get to know the people behind the platform.
Definitely.
Because they're important. So the people behind the platform, you used to do this. You were with.
I still do.
You still do, but you were actually with a platform. You were with Unily, until a few months ago, and Unily has put in platforms into some pretty large companies around the world. But now you're totally independent. So tell us, let's go back to this email issue. And how many, should emails end?
Well,
should we get rid of emails?
I'm going to say no, you can't. I'm going to be a little bit controversial. I'm going to defend email to a certain extent.
Someone needs
you got 200,000 you haven't read, and others have got lots as well. But I think overall, if you look at the stats, there's lots of stats flying around. There are something like 5.5 billion active email accounts in existence. They are sending out something like 293 billion emails a day. Maybe 50% is spam. That's very true. But I think one of the reasons why email is not going to go away for quite some time is because email allows a degree of accountability between one individual and the next. And equally, because an individual can talk to someone at their own pace, in their own time. I absolutely like all these digital workplace platforms that allow a much different kind of form of communication and collaboration. But at the same time, I'm a firm advocate of individuals needing their space, a bit of privacy, and especially now, time to think. that's why I think one of the reasons why email is not going to go away tomorrow, because it allows you to control the conversation. It allows you to have a semblance of control in this busy world that we live in, right? And I think the other thing is that, kind of back to the start of the whole session, I would also argue in the same way that I'd rather have too much information than not enough. I'd rather have too much choice than not enough choice in terms of how we start to deal with how we work together, the tools we use and so on. Because I think my fundamental point, whether it's 200,000 emails in your inbox or not, it says to me that you're actually a brilliant filter of stuff you don't want to read. My kind of starting point or my position about all this, with technology or not as the case may be, is that actually I don't think we give human beings as much credit as we should in terms of being brilliant filters of stuff you don't want to deal with or ignore, or it's not relevant to me. And I think that's the big challenge for communicators, whether it's email, articles, messages, Twitter, or whatever it might be, is to try and work out the best way to engage your readership and to think, you know, what really matters to them, whether it's an email or an article, it doesn't really matter, but it's the content that has to stand out every time. Content is the key of this conversation.
Oh, right, so that kind of turns it around. So really we should be marketing what we're saying in a way.
Well, you've got to be saying important things that you want me to read. So I don't care if it's an email, Twitter, or WhatsApp, or whatever, but if you're just sending me stuff that I'm not really bothered about, well, I'm going to bin it. Right? I think the other point I just want to quickly add is that there is this, you know, sense of anxiety, information overload, distraction, the tools, the phones, the following us around, etc. To a certain extent, that is true. But I think the other thing that is more pertinent to kind of describe here is that we probably feel we're distracted or overloaded when we have a very passive relationship to the content that's been sent to us. And we think we can't do anything with it. Or we can't speak out in a meeting where you have no specific email and there's no culture to say, actually, you know, you can speak out, you can challenge. But if you can't feel that you can do that, then of course you're going to be the recipient of much stuff that to you has no bearing on what you need to be doing in your daytime. But if there's not a culture that kind of encourages people to speak out, be creative, to challenge, to say no, then you're going to feel overwhelmed and overloaded. So, you know, the digital workplace is a brilliant way to create that culture, but it has to be based on more kind of critical, open-minded sort of thinking, which I would argue not many businesses have got right.
Well, we are the home of command and control, aren't we? So we are the last bastion of feudalism, really, because you know, if you're paying someone, you do expect them to listen to you occasionally and maybe do what you say, possibly. So it's about changing behaviours. Now, what we've seen in the outside external world is that people have adapted to Twitter, they've adapted to Facebook. Sometimes these adaptations have been quite terrifying, particularly if you own a newspaper. You know, suddenly all your advertising revenue is disappearing and so on. And if you believe in the old forms of democracy, you might be slightly concerned that people are being over-influenced by their bubbles. How do we change behaviours inside organisations in a way that is both good for the user, but also good for where the business is heading?
I mean, it's kind of back to what I'm saying, really. I think that the brilliant thing about digital workplaces and all these tools is that really what they're about is encouraging employees in all senses to contribute, to actually engage thoroughly with their ideas. Because what's the most frustrating thing to me if I'm working somewhere is I've been ignored. No one's asked me for my opinion about how to make a process better, to innovate, to be creative. And that's a very serious problem that a lot of companies have, because they're very dismissive of what really should be a very creative culture. So actually we have the tools already to do it, but it's really a question of management, will and leadership to actually put themselves on the line. So if you really are committed to innovation, being, you know, creative, you've got to ask. And you've got to ask not in a cursory sense that I will not reply to your point you've made, but you've got to thoroughly engage in that conversation. It's a hell of a job. Because it means breaking down lots of hierarchies and silos. But if you get it right, it can be an incredibly vibrant place to work. So I think we already have the tools to do it.
Nicole, are you seeing any changes in behavior?
Yeah, I was going to say, we see a lot of leaders using our platform specifically to drive a business transformation. So one example, and I think some of the things do need to come from senior leadership to show that the behavior change is okay, because often it's a culture change that's foundational. So one example, Whirlpool, it's 100,000 employees, been around for over 100 years. A new CEO about a year and a half ago came in and really wanted to create a culture of transparency and trust, which was very different. And so in order to do that, and sort of instead of just saying, oh, we're now a very transparent culture, what he started doing is using our platform to answer a question on video every single week, unfiltered, and he would get hard questions like, I'm a blue collar worker, why don't I have access to the learning tools that my white collar workers?
Yep.
And he would answer and say, first of all, I didn't know that. Second of all, let's not call ourselves blue collar, white collar, we're one Whirlpool. And third, I'll look into that. And so that type of activity from a senior leader, and then he would get other senior leaders to do it. He'll also use our platform in his Whirlpool app to take selfie pictures when he's down at the call center with other employees. So it's that type of action that must drive it. And just an interesting note on them, that behavior change internally has changed their external perception in a measurable way. So it is a culture change, and Lauren, I'd be interested to know how you've engaged your leaders, because I think that is key to driving. It's not a technology issue, it's really management.
Just quickly for me, I think absolutely when that happens is brilliant, but what I've seen, and there's stats and all sorts, that is sometimes not fully committed to that level of change, because one example is new tools are introduced, social networks and all sorts of stuff, social chorus or whatever. How much money is really invested to train up employees to use those tools, to really actually, to find new ways to collaborate, to develop new ideas and so on and so forth. Often that level of infrastructural commitment doesn't coincide with launching a new digital workplace. So it kind of exists, but it's not really pushed to its fullest.
Let's ask Lorraine. Lorraine, did you just switch it on, or did you get yourself some training in champions?
A marginal training, and the reason it was marginal training is because it's so intuitive. I mean, did you ever get training on how to use Facebook or how to use LinkedIn? You kind of taught yourself, and even your grandma probably taught themselves how to use Facebook, didn't they? But coming back to kind of both of your earlier points, it's about a culture change. So my job as kind of VP of internal communications isn't to do communications, interestingly. Years ago it was about writing content and kind of sending it out and encouraging people to read it. Now everyone's a journalist. It's about capturing people's hearts and minds, capturing their imagination so they feel that they want to contribute to the business. So they feel they're part of it, and they own the business in a sense. It's all about business. Now, obviously, I've got to provide the framework for that, so it's not just completely the Wild West. But if you can find a way of engaging people in the organisation, right across the organisation, from the CEO downwards, and having a really honest conversation about the business, then people really care. And once they really care, that's the kind of when the light bulb goes on, and that's when people give their best, to the organisation, do their best work, are most engaged, most productive. And that's kind of where we're trying to get to.
Great, lovely. Well, let's throw it open to questions. Mark, if you could be our question invigilator, if it were, and pick out ones that are striking a chord with people. Is there anything that immediately that's come up?
Okay, so if anyone's got any questions, just type them in now. I had one, which is, I just asked everyone, does anyone have any input on how to change behaviours in organisation and drive adoption of collaboration tools? You've given quite a few answers to that. Jack Vincent saying, why do we introduce tools that don't make sense to our community? Why do they need to be trained? Exactly the point Lorraine just made.
Yeah, I mean, before you even start thinking about tools, you should really be thinking about what does the business need, and what is the business strategy, and how you tie one to the other. But you have to go out there and ask them.
I think that, sorry, Martin. However, some tools are going to be by their very nature complex, or you're wanting to get from that tool, that way of collaborating, innovating, some fairly complicated processes out of it. So I think that we have to have it both ways. Some things are going to be complicated. And equally, the brilliant thing about tools and digital workplaces is you don't quite know what's going to happen until you start using them.
True.
But
Yeah.
you've got to, so the point I'm trying to make is I think that you've got to encourage people to experiment and be a bit creative and not so fixed in terms of how you might work together.
And that's about creating the culture in which people feel that they can participate, the space, you know, taking away the fear, supported, you know. Even if, you know, what you're saying is a little bit controversial, you know, it's about saying, you know, it's okay. Now, having said that, you know, in both organisations, you know, we did create some ground rules for our tools, but they were very high level. You can't insult people, you can't swear, you know, it's that kind of big stuff. But other than that, as long as it's a way of, you know, kind of progressing the business, and some of it is social as well, we're happy for people to have those conversations.
Could I ask a question, which is, we've had email for, you know, 20, 30 years, and it's very rare you come across an organisation that uses it really, really smartly and manages information through email and communication and relationships really smartly. Now we're introducing these other collaborative tools. How is it the panel here think how are we going to do it right this time and not have people throw information and communication onto these tools in a way that's actually going to create a worse mess in some respects or a bigger mess? How are we going to do that if we're not going to train them?
Misuse of tools.
One thing is the difference between email and, say, Slack or Yammer and so on is that those latter tools should be known as public spaces predominantly. And because of that, actually, you can be very reticent anyway about swearing, for example, being antisocial. So, you know,
you don't really know who's listening. If you're on the Yammer, you don't know. It's a wider community.
Yeah, and I think actually they work best, in my opinion, when you actually are in more secure, closed groups, which then becomes slightly like email again, because you know who you're talking to.
Microsoft Teams is a perfect example.
Exactly.
Microsoft Teams is now the second fastest selling app of Microsoft after Outlook, and many people on this call will be using it at the moment. But it's not very good for communicating across a whole organization, is it? No.
I mean, there's a very big difference between a collaboration tool like a Teams and communication, and being able to say, again, that right information, right person, right place to drive some sort of action. So if you have a CEO video or a head of business unit talking about an update to the business or an overview on strategic priorities, you want to maximize the number of people who receive that, and even beyond that, either understand, take an action, understand what does this mean for my business. You know, we would take a very different approach. We don't care if they get that via email, mobile, somewhere else, it's that they got it. So it's really about getting those important messages targeted to the right people to drive the action, which is communications. That's how we describe communications, which again is very different from a collaboration tool, which might have a different business outcome of we just want people to talk together, or we want them to work on a project together.
And ours does a little bit of both. So our platform we can use to share information, share news. So if our CEO wants to talk to people, we'll use it for that purpose. But as an internal comms function, we'll regulate that. So we don't have 20 people talking on the same day. Usually we limit it to one a day. And then aside, you know, alongside of that is effectively your Twitter feed. So you choose who you follow and the communities you follow and the parts of the business you follow. And if you find that it's not relevant to you anymore or you're being overloaded, you can just switch that off. So the information that you see is the stuff that you are choosing, making a deliberate choice to receive every day.
Fair enough, lovely. Any other questions there in the last 4 minutes that we've got?
Sophie's saying Yammer is good for business comms rather than MS Teams, which someone said.
Let's just pick up on because that's a fascinating subject. Yammer has got a bit of a bad reputation. It was one of the early ones into the field. It was bought by Microsoft. It wasn't built by them. It was, and you kind of feel like it was a stepchild. And Microsoft never really loved it enough Some companies made a very good job of making YAML work, but most companies have found that YAML's adoption rates have been about less than 20%, and therefore it's failed as a platform. That's changing now. They're rebuilding Yammer from the ground up.
Haven't they been doing that for the last 10 years?
I think they mean it this time. I think I've seen the prototypes. Well, you can see it on the mobile app, actually. And I think it's partly to do with Slack being so successful as well, so that they're either going to kill it or they're going to do something with it. And they've decided to do something with it. But that does raise this big issue of when do I use Teams and when do I use Yammer? And particularly, when would I use Teams and when would I use Social Chorus? Because Teams is, it's going to be a big thing.
Yep, we integrate with them.
Yeah, you integrate with them.
Yeah.
So is it clear, do you think, that people know when to use one tool and when to use? I mean, we do, as professional communicators, it's very clear to us, but for users.
No, and I think that's the meet them where they are. I think there will be some people who will be very comfortable inside of Teams and spend most of their time in Teams. And so when we have that important CEO update, we need to target it to Teams to meet those people there. There might be other people who are just, they love the Social Chorus platform, they're there, that's fine. Again, there are other people who don't like any of those places and wanted an email, so let's give them that an email.
Okay.
And I think, integration is really key because, people haven't got time or headspace to think, which channel do I go to? If it's all there in one place, people don't really care where it's coming from. They care that they've got the information that they need to do their job.
I think also, for me, the key thing is always about choice. Because if you force everyone across the organisation to use one tool, I guarantee you the next day they're all using something different. That's because it's affordances. People kind of use things in different ways for different people. I think that's the other thing about this is that the tool or channel will dictate the kind of conversation you have through it. So LinkedIn versus Facebook versus Twitter, very, very different types of communication you have. But that's quite purposeful as well, because you can chat to your engineers different to your sales team who want more of an immediate feedback and more of a longitudinal thing. So you have to give people choice, because if you don't, you'll be, suffering for it for the next day or beyond when they use their own thing that they've never been supplied efficiently.
Mark, thank you very much. Would you be able to wrap up? We've got about 10 minutes. We've got about 10 or 15 seconds to move on.
Okay, fantastic. So what we've seen here is these changes in behavior. It's about behavior. The tools are all there, but it's about how you implement them. And more importantly, it's kind of meeting, what I'm hearing here is think user-centric. Think about the person who's receiving your message and then coming up with the strategy, the governance and the tools that
and the business outcomes. So ultimately, it's
and of course, the
business outcome.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you for your contribution. Please, if you can, stay in the studio while we continue with the webinar. Back to you, Mark.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Nicole and Martin and Lorraine. Really, really appreciate that. Excellent. I'm going to be doing a presentation about Office 365 and Teams shortly. But before that, we've got a presentation from another member of the IORG steering committee, Monica Seeley. Monica Seeley's been working in the email behavioral space for some years. I'll let her tell you how many. It's more than me, and I've been working in it for 20 years. So Monica, I'm going to unmute you oh, where is Monica? She joined a little bit later. She went off and then she came back. So she's not exactly where I thought she was. So Monica, you're unmuted and you should be able to share your webcam now if you wish to do so. Just tell me when you need the next slide showing.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, I'll share my webcam as well. Can you see me? Yes. Okay, well, I confess, okay, Mark, I confess up. I have been working in the email behavioral space for 30 plus years, one way and another. So I'm coming at it, all of this from a very slightly different angle, but I'm going to pick up on quite a few of the points that various people have made. I'm fascinated, 2,000 unread emails, and I've only got a short time, so can I have the next slide, please, Mark?
Yeah, it's up.
Okay, and the one after this. I think from what I see, over the years, we've seen these tools come and we've seen these tools go. And I think, one of the problems is getting people to think outside the box, because I think, Martin, you made the point, it's absolutely true. Email, if you look at the stats, is not going away. It is the sort of first place people go to. And I think one of the problems people don't think outside the box are things like the corporate culture. People believe they need an audit trail, and in certain cases that is clearly true. But I think there is also, in uncertain times, research has shown a lot of cover my backside at the moment, a lot of stress. I think there's an information culture challenge. We are now all very time poor. We're very used to a push information culture, which means you will tell me what I need, as opposed to me having to go actively and look at it, the pull information culture. There's a technology issue, and I think we've touched on the training issue. And having been around in technology for a long time, I still don't think technology is as obvious to use. Plus, I think a lot of the sharing tools up until Office 365 became really popular were very difficult for people to implement in a small way unless they were being implemented corporately. I think there's a technological agility. There's as you've all touched upon earlier, sometimes if you want to put a big system in, it can take a little while, and some organizations move more slowly and people get frustrated. But I think now, when I come to talk about OneNote in a second, there's far more technology around, especially if you're on Office 365 or you are an external person working with small people used to working in the cloud. You're much more able to get started. I also think people are often, it's perhaps willingness to share. Information has always been regarded as power, no matter how far back you go through history, and even into modern days. And by that, I'm excluding sharing on Facebook. I'm talking about corporate information, power, politics. So I think those are some of the issues. So how does one, you've talked about how you change the behavior, and I agree with everything that you've said. So how does one get started? Well, if you give me the next slide, please, Mark. Okay, I came about OneNote in a serendipitous way, which I will talk about in a minute, but I think it's a phenomenal tool for working in small teams if you want to start creating a pull information culture whereby you go when you're ready. If you want to reduce all that volume of reply or email threads, email chains, because OneNote basically lets you store and share. I've put it there, I don't need to read it. But basically anything, the things that are missing there, you can share audio, you can record on it and share it. One of the features I adore is that if you want to have a meeting with your co-workers, it will even create a template for you. And so that is, for me, one less email. It's got smart lookup, internal, external. Mark is also telling me time is short. So let me just, so I think those are some of the benefits of OneNote as a small way of getting started to basically start processing information effectively, getting things done in a sense. Do you want to give me my next slide, please, Mark? I'm going to give you 3 case histories whereby we have got things done, and whereby, if you read Dave Allen's Getting Things Done, we've collected information, we've processed it more efficiently, we've organized it very efficiently, we can all review it, and we can all do things with it. And the first was how I came about it as the external consultant to an international IT director. who had a very small team. And so I was his interface between new technology coming along in waves and the users. And he would say to me, try this, please, Monica. And he threw OneNote at me one day and he said, go off and have a look. And by the way, let's use it together. And what we did, we created a shared notebook, which dramatically allowed us to really embody, I guess, getting things done and reduce the number of emails, because we created a notebook, we organized the information, and I would put things in there for him to see at his leisure. He could then comment back, say, pursue this one, add this to it, do something with this. And it just worked brilliantly. Prior to that, we would have, I guess, just sent lots of emails randomly. I think that's the other thing. So you've either got to file them somewhere, but this way with the tabs in our OneNote, we were able to be more efficient. The second is also a very personal use of mine. I'm just in the throes of writing a new book with somebody in America. So we have a shared book in which we're collecting all our ideas, and we talk online every so often, and we actually believe probably the book will be written off OneNote because we'll have all our ideas in there. But again, we can share. It will tell us when somebody has added something new, but you don't have to have that distraction. And the other example is on my website, but is a CEO and her EA, where they got fed up at the piles of paper, wasting time updating board minutes last minute, wasting time traveling with changed travel plans, for example. So they again created a OneNote shared digital notebook. And this is the CEO's one thing she takes with her on her iPad, and the EA can then update it minute by minute, day by day. But again, it's getting down the stress of all that information coming at you and working out and trying to find out of the 2,000 emails. Well, let's say you get 100 emails a day if you're a CEO, that's a small number. So it enabled them to very quickly see the wood from the trees, so to speak. So what are the benefits? And I've given you some of them. Mark, can I have the next slide up? I think, okay, I've looked at a very tactical way, but I think it's very important to be able to start small sometimes and create a small group that shows how you can do things differently and you can measure it. So I tried to pick out just really 3 key benefits there, and they're fairly obvious, but for me, on the business I'm in, I get called in by people saying, how do we reduce email overload, information overload? It plays into well-being. It plays into, I think, a lot of what's going on in the UK around extension rebellion, in terms of being more ecological. I'm also being asked if I can wrap up and keep to time, which I shall do. So Nathan started by saying, take one thing away. I think if you can't implement a large change, try and implement a different change. And I promise you, you will get some of the information overload down. Thank you, Mark. And that's
Thank
me.
you very
and that's
much,
where you
Monica.
find me.
Sorry to rush you there. I so agree with you, and great that you shared some real life ways that you're using collaboration tools, collaborating in the cloud as it is. Let me just take your video off, and then we'll carry on. And actually, the next presenter, thanks very much, Monica, is me. So I will put up my first slide, and there we are. So I'm going to talk about beyond email and new collaboration tools, focusing really on team and other collaboration tools, similar collaboration tools that you may be using? I know there's been a lot of mention of Teams. I've been working in the email space for 20 years, as I said, helping organizations change the way that they use email. And we found that a lot of organizations, well, every organization, one way or the other, is going to have to move to Office 365 and Teams. And they're finding adoption very, very difficult. So I want to run a quick poll here and ask people if you're using Teams or a similar collaboration tool, what is your adoption? And by that, I mean, how many people are using it on a regular basis throughout the day? If you could all vote quickly, how many are using it on a regular basis throughout the day? And we don't have vast amounts of time, so if you can vote, just click the one that's relevant to you, then click submit, and we'll see what we get. So about half of you have voted. We need half more, so if you could all vote, please. I'm going to close the poll in a moment. Fantastic. So I'll close the poll and I'll play the results back. And there we go. You'll see that 17% are 50% or plus, 50% or more, and the vast majority are less, nearly half are less than 10%. So there is an issue with adoption, and I think everyone knows that. So we've developed some training, and I want to give you just a very quick taster of that. And it's about how do you collaborate using Office 365 and Teams. It's about raising people's awareness, really, which I think is the way through. You've got to raise people's awareness, how they can overcome the barriers, how they can make the tools work for them and everyone else, and how they can become a productive collaborator and achieve more in less time. And I think one of the things is understanding what it actually is. It's a big question mark for a lot of people. So let's just look at a very simple way of describing what is Office 365. Well, traditionally, we've all had servers on our premises. If you speak to someone at Microsoft or a Microsoft partner, they'll call it an on-prem server. And on there, we had the traditional Office applications. This has all moved to the cloud now, where there's Office 365 and Microsoft have 26 applications. There are many, many, many more third-party applications that you can use within the cloud. This means that people don't need it, organizations don't need these applications on their servers, so they can potentially get rid of their servers. But it also means that they can access information, share information, as Monica's doing, from anywhere, with anyone who also has access to that same information. It's a very, very rich place to collaborate and to work, and to just show you what the potential is. If email's at one end and people are at the other end, a lot of people think Office 365, Teams, other collaboration tools are there. But because of what you can do with all these, and this includes artificial intelligence, real-time collaboration, sharing files, etc., we think what we're actually looking at is something completely new and completely different. And the opportunity is something that we've hardly scratched the surface with, and it will grow. And as knowledge workers, which I think we all probably are, we all need to learn how to operate in this new world. And we can have rich views on data. We can have much more meaningful collaboration. There's narrative. You can have conversations. There's less confusion, hopefully, as long as people curate well, more transparency, and this will lead to increased productivity and time saving. And there is unlimited potential for creativity and innovation if people are willing to go there. And I think there isn't a lot of choice. You know, we have to go there, and it's looking at things really, as Jonathan said earlier, through a new lens. But how do we overcome the barriers? How do we get people adopting? Well, let me ask you, those of you who are using Teams or other collaborating tools, what are the main barriers to adoption for you that you know? Could you just type in quickly? What are the main human barriers that you have noticed? Mark, if you could type in on behalf of the panel. And let's just see, lack of IT support, expertise. Well, that's going to be a big barrier, isn't it? Habit. Yep, absolutely. It's not a habit. People default to their usual ways, which for the most part is going to be email. Comfortable with what we are using. Yeah, we've certainly come across that. And so these are some of the things we've come across after researching this for a year. It keeps changing. I can't get online. CEO's not open to change. Yeah. Everything works fine. It's what I know. All this stuff, start small. I think Monica said this in her chat earlier, always start small. Start with a small team if you're using Teams, a team that you work with all the time, and start with one file that you work with all the time and collaborate with that. You need a moderator of your teams. You definitely need a moderator. You need to know how to moderate yourself as well. You need to curate information. I think approach is really important. This is the way forward, and this is the way that people are going to go. It is the way that collaboration is going to go. Email will be around for a long time for various reasons, but it will be used less and less. And I estimate within somewhere between 5 and 10 years, people will start switching it off and will be on collaboration tools. You need to roll with the punches. You're going to hit IT walls. You're going to hit barriers with people who don't have a license. I think Martin said earlier, sometimes people don't, you can't communicate with teams with externals quite often. They may not have a license. So you need to roll with the punches, but you need to rock and roll. You need to create flow, and you need to think about them at the other end. Always when you're communicating virtually, you need to project yourself to the other end. You need to curate your information, and you need to make sure that you're not throwing up information that's going to waste people's time and, as Lorraine said, does not provide business benefit, clear business benefit and value, because otherwise we're just transferring our CCs and our reply to alls onto these fantastic new tools. So that's my piece for what it was worth. I hope there was at least one thing people could take away from that. And I'm now going to hand back over to Jonathan. So Jonathan, you can use your webcam. You're unmuted. And over to you for your concluding remarks, Q&A.
Here I am. Can you see me on the camera? Mark, yep. Do you see me on the camera?
Yes, we can see you on the camera.
Right. Okay, so I've put together an assortment of questions that were asked to me through private message and asked in the public discussion. I'd like to thank everyone, our panelists, our speakers, our support team on Mark Powell's side, because with a few glitches, this worked brilliantly. So I'm going to touch first on Mark Powell's question about how to do collaboration properly. And out of the 20 plus years of research I've done in this area, we've come up with a model that works. The answer is what we call the one environment rule. And simply put, the one environment rule states that the more you keep someone in one overarching environment for the overwhelming majority of what they have to do, the greater the likelihood is that you'll succeed. One of the reasons that supporting the one environment rule is so critical is the phenomenon of recovery time, which I had uncovered. Recovery time is the time it takes you to get back to where you were before an interruption. And once you start to introduce multiple tools into the equation, you're going to get interrupted and distracted no matter how good the tools are. So having more tools is usually just a bad idea. So this all goes in the knowledge workers unconscious, but if you've ever wondered where at the end of the day 28% of your day went, I've just told you. So I'd like to ask any of the speakers, including Mark, and any of the panelists, if they want to speak to that issue, both of how to do collaboration properly and the one environment rule. Not all at once.
If any of the speakers want to say something, just put up your hand and I'll unmute you.
Mark, do you want to?
Mark writes. Going for it.
That's great, lovely. Thank you very much, Jonathan, for throwing down those two gauntlets there. The one environment rule, wouldn't that be lovely? It would be. You're absolutely right. We get this sawtooth effect. This effect, if you think of a saw and magnify it, that we're working on something, we get up to almost completing that blog post or whatever it might be, or that genius idea, and then a notification comes in and we go down and we lose our concentration. The problem is it's very, very difficult to get people in an organization to stay on one platform because they have too much choice. I don't know if any other members are.
I mean, so Martin here, I think my perspective is that we might have tried that one environment, if you like, platform 5-10 years ago. That's when networking technology was less mature, there were fewer options, even pricing models and so on. I think that now, because the tools are so cheap, you've got more ubiquity, more choice. But I think the main problem for me is that companies, as I've realized, big companies especially, are just incredibly complicated. They've got legacy systems, legacy culture even in terms of how people want to work together. And I think sometimes it's just too unrealistic to get everyone to sing in the same song sheet, if you will, and collaborate or communicate in the same way. It's a great ideal, but I personally now adopt a much more pragmatic approach. And the main thing is we have to at least try and allow people to have a bit more choice, and where possible, make sure the data can connect. Yes, of course, but otherwise, one platform for everybody, I think, personally, is more unrealistic than possible.
In order to keep on time, I just need to sort of cut that off. I just want to say that what Mark said about too much choice goes back to the Dyna conundrum that I presented earlier. You're right. I mean, within a very large company, and there are tremendously large companies subscribing to our research, including IBM with over 400,000 knowledge workers, they still manage to largely follow the one environment rule, at least within work groups and units. Clearly not everything fits all sizes. Moving to the next question, and thank you all for that answer. Jack Vincent made a comment, which I'm turning into he has a question at the end. Teams may be great inside companies. It's not so great between companies. He's asking about intercompany collaboration tools. What do others use? Please raise your hand and Mark will allow you to speak.
Sorry, Jonathan, are you asking the panelists if they want to speak?
Yeah, these are all questions from the audience, studio members to the panelists.
Thank you very much. Great. So, other collaboration tools that MS Teams is going like a steam train at the moment.
Just like a steam train.
Lots of people are using it. Is it the only game?
One person at a time there, please. Let's not chime in until somebody finishes.
Over to you.
Thank you. So this is Nicole. I think that we see Teams being widely used. I'm personally a big fan of Slack. I think that it's harder getting traction inside the enterprise. Mm-hmm. But I would say that those are, Lorraine's, I think those are the two top as far as collaboration. And every organization does need a collaboration tool and a way to promote, whether it's work productivity or just to drive that type of culture. And I think that the opportunity for one platform is really centralizing the publishing and the creation of the content and reducing the work of the communicator, and then letting the employees choose where they do want to engage.
Yeah, but that's actually not the question. The question is intercompany collaboration. You're not addressing that. You're addressing intra-company collaboration. So if anyone has something to the actual question, between companies, because it's really hard to get tools, to go across firewalls, that presents the greatest challenge, and you end up emailing documents back and forth, and it doesn't work.
Okay, well, just to come in on that, you'll be glad to know that Teams does work between companies. Microsoft Teams can be used between companies now.
Mm-hmm. Have you seen it used well, I guess is my question.
The reason why Microsoft Teams is working well is partly because they've integrated Skype into it. So Skype for Business, which has become a ubiquitous business tool, is being discontinued as a standalone system. and it's been incorporated into Microsoft Teams, and it works much better in Microsoft Teams than it does in Skype. So Microsoft, if you like, are forcing the market and forcing us into Teams through that popular application. By the same token, the reason why Teams works well is that obviously it connects to all your files and it connects to all your groups. And pretty soon it'll connect to Yammer as well. So not only can we talk to each other and have conversations, but we'll have one version of the truth when we go to that one file or that file.
I love that. I love that. Thank you. That's so on point. In the interest of time, let me go to a question about the cost of information overload from Suzanne. Do we have any documentation as we're talking about information overload, but is it really a problem? Is there a cost? Before I throw this to the panel, I'm just going to throw out my brief answer, since I was apparently the first person to monetize the cost of information overload in my research about 12 to 15 years ago. The last study we did, information overload cost in the US economy, approximately $998 billion per annum. And in a study we did solely focusing on one company, Intel, the cost to the bottom line for Intel of information overload, and Intel was nice enough to let us analyze what was up until that point not publicly available data, was about $1 billion to the bottom line, which if you're thinking in the CFO mode, if you have something that costs $1 billion, you actually have to disclose that on your financials, but there's no way of doing so with information overload.
Yeah.
We have one more moment, so I'd like to throw that out to anyone else about the cost.
Well, if we can come in here, you've hit the nail on the head there, Jonathan. As we all know, business productivity, GDP, has not risen in the last 10 years, which seems bizarre. We have all this technology. The last time that we got return on investment was really the introduction of the fax and the introduction of Microsoft Office. Since then, we've seen GDP flatline in the Western world. So who wants to come in on this one, on the value? Bring in Martin.
Well, I think that it's very difficult to kind of put numbers on these things, in my opinion, because you can equally put a number or try and put a number on what I think is the real cause of information overload if you take that concept, which is bad decision making, bad management, who kind of create too much bloat in terms of how we communicate between one another, email or whatever form as it may. So I think that we can find many sort of issues, causes or problems that to try and monetize, to put a figure on, but often we're sort of passing the buck for where the blame really lies in terms of how companies operate or don't, as the case may be, which to me is sometimes down to bad leadership, or when it comes to productivity, is the failure to invest their profit, if you will, or revenue in R&D, in better process design, better tools, better training, as we talked about, or better productivity. Now, on that, it's about investment, but it's also because, for me, the real issue connected with decision making is because companies don't want to take a risk, are not creative, not prepared to challenge the market, and sometimes to dig up what they did before and sail the ship into a new direction. So, what I'm trying to say is I don't really have an answer, but a lot of things are very connected around a cultural problem which exists in business as well as in broader society too.
As unfortunately, somebody apparently is doing construction right above my office, but I'd like to thank everyone for participating. I want to add, Sophie Costello just pointed out that the cost is your sanity. I thought that's a very good way of ending our celebration of Information Overload Day. I want to thank everyone for coming to join me and everyone else here who have worked so hard putting this together. I mentioned everyone before, so I won't do it again, but thank you very much, and happy Information Overload Day, everyone. Good day.
Thank you, Jonathan. And one last point, there will be an evaluation form that will open in your browser when you leave. If you could all complete it, we'd really appreciate it. Thank you very much for coming along and being here. It's goodbye from me. Goodbye.